All right. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Welcome to the Monday, January 27th, 2020 meeting of the Durham County Board of Commissioners. I will share the public charge. The Board of Commissioners asks its members and citizens to conduct themselves in a respectful, courteous manner, both with the board and fellow citizens. At any time, should any member of the board or any citizen fail to observe this public charge, the chair will ask the offending person to leave the meeting until that individual regains personal control. Should decorum fail to be restored, the chair will recess the meeting until such time that a genuine commitment to the public charge is observed. As a courtesy to others, please turn off cell phones during the meeting. I will now ask that we rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Are there any adjustments to the agenda this evening? Seeing none, I'll move to the announcements. Youth Listening Project. The Office on Youth is hosting a youth listening project to capture youth voices between the ages of 13 to 24 and caregivers of children in Durham. The event will be held tomorrow, January 28th, from 5 to 7:15 p.m. at the LGBTQ Center of Durham, located at 114 Hunt Street. Please email Alice D. Frazier at durhamnc.gov or text 984-260-6703 to save your seat. Go Durham is adding new routes and night service. This started on Saturday, January 25th. 2 additional high-frequency routes, Chapel Hill Road to South Square and Fayetteville Road to MLK Jr. Parkway, along with additional service at night. And you can find out more information at gotransit.org. And again, this will also be on our website. Voting information for the March 3rd, 2020 primary election. Photo ID is not required for the 2020 primary election. I'll repeat, photo ID is not required. The voter registration deadline for the primary election is February 7th. Absentee by mail voting request deadline is February 25th, and they must be returned to the Board of Elections by Tuesday, May 3rd. The early voting primary election begins Thursday, February 13th, and ends Saturday, February 29th. And more information can be found out about early voting at our website, www.dcovotes.com. Commissioner Howerton?
Madam Chair, while we're on that topic, I have a couple of questions regarding the McDougal residents, and the question is, how will they have an opportunity to vote given that they are at all different hotels, addresses? We need to make every effort to make sure that these individuals have an opportunity to vote. Has any plans been made to make sure that that happens?
That's a great question. So I guess I would ask.
Can someone answer
manager.
that, or just so we have? Is there any idea what's going to happen with that?
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm not aware of any specific plans at this point, but certainly will relay that information to the Housing Authority staff and Executive Director to see if there are any considerations being made for that.
And will there be so I'd like to make sure that there's an announcement either in the paper or some way that people will know whether it's a ballot, that they will be absentee ballots, or some way that people have an opportunity to vote.
I will share that information with the Housing Authority.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about early voting is that you can go to any location. So I think the key thing is making sure that people have transportation and have the ability to get to the early voting sites, or like you say, have the opportunity to get an absentee
Yeah.
ballot. Yeah.
Well, they may be getting mail, and right now, I don't know if they are receiving their mail
Right,
because people are displaced
Right,
so badly
right.
that
right.
just-
That's a
we
great,
just need to make sure that these things are
yeah,
happening.
okay. Thank you. Tax Administration Programs and Offerings. The Durham County Tax Administration will begin accepting applications for the hardship payment plan and will be offering property tax relief programs to qualifying elderly, disabled, and U.S. veteran homeowners. For more information, please visit www.dconc.gov/tax or call 919-560-0300. So our tax department will work with property owners on a payment plan, and also our tax department will come out to your neighborhood group, to your church, or any organization. We're trying to get the word out about the existing state property tax relief programs. Our staff will also help people fill out the application forms and help you see if you qualify for the state relief programs. We know that there are many people in our community that qualify for these programs who are not benefiting from them. Are there any additional announcements? Okay, seeing none, I'll move on to our work session, November 4th, 2019 minutes, and regular session, January 13th, 2020 minutes.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Reckow, seconded by Commissioner Howerton. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the minutes are unanimously approved.
Madam Chair, I just want to highlight that there were some important directives that we need to make sure get followed up on. Our staff is doing such a good job logging in the directives, but now we need to follow up on them.
So we will discuss those at our February work session on Monday. So we will get into those directives. We have a ceremonial item this evening, and we would love to welcome our new Public Health Director, Mr. Rodney Jenkins. And Rodney, if you don't mind coming up here, because this is a momentous occasion, just so you know that you are beginning a new era here in Durham County government.
Don't I know it, Madam Chair?
Not to put you under any pressure or anything. We really do welcome you, and we would love to give you this opportunity to tell everybody about yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the members of the board, I say good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
What a privilege it is to be in Durham County, and my family and I, as my pastor would say, are honeymoon happy and peacock proud. Be representing you all at the Public Health Department. I've waited a long time for this opportunity, and it couldn't have happened in a better county. Durham is very progressive, and as I've said to you in private, Madam Chair, I've been thoroughly impressed with all things Durham. And it's been a fast and furious 2 weeks, to say the least. But this is what I trained for, and this is what I've prepared myself for. I also think it not robbery to let you know that I stand before you humble to be able to serve this community and to also be in service with 250 plus excellent healthcare professionals down the street at the healthcare center. It is my intention to represent them well and to represent this county well as we endeavor to advance public health and to ensure that our community is doing well and having positive outcomes. And I thank you for the warm welcome.
Well, thank you. And, you know, when you walk into that building every day and you see the saying from Phil Freelon outside that building that our success as a community is measured by our capacity to enhance the well-being of everyone in our community. And so that's our touchstone, what we're all working towards. So we welcome you as a partner and a leader in that effort, and please let us each know how we can support you in any way.
Most certainly will,
Thank you.
and I certainly look forward to working with each and every one of you.
Thank you so much. And I also am going to put some other folks on the spot in the audience tonight. I just met coming in, and if you don't mind all coming up to the podium over here and just introduce yourselves. We have members of the U.S. Army Civil
Affairs Division.
I'm sorry?
Civil Affairs Division.
Civil Affairs Division. So if you don't mind coming up and introducing yourselves and telling us why you are here in Durham. And we'd also love to welcome you all here to our community. And if you were here incognito, I'm sorry if I just blew your cover.
Cover.
Well, thank you for the warm welcome. And my name is Captain Juan Quiros. Like I said, we're from Fort Bragg out of 91st Civil Affairs Battalion. And the purpose of our visit is because we are deploying this spring to West Africa. And we just came here to learn a little bit more about how local government works in, the surrounding area, obviously here in Durham. So we can take some of these lessons and apply them when we go and work with civil authorities in West Africa, and hopefully kind of improve the situation there while advancing, our own U.S. interests. And once again, thank you for the reception. Everyone's been very kind and gracious that we've met with so far. We hope to meet with more people in the coming days. Thank you once again.
Okay, thank you. And anything that we can do? I don't know if, Commissioner Hill?
I'd like to tell you a special welcome. I'm glad you guys are here. My father was an instructor at John F. Kennedy Special Warfare School, so you guys are part of the family, so I look forward to having conversations with you, so thanks.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
And I don't know if there's if there's anything that we can do to help, please let us know. And I don't know, are they working with your staff, Mr.?
This has been an ongoing effort for the past 3 years or so. We work with the Civil Affairs Division out of Fort Bragg. And so this is, I think, the third deployment that we've had here over the years. And they come each year about this time and essentially do a inside study of the work that we do. And we're always delighted to host them.
Yeah, so thank you, and we wish you also the best in your deployment.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Okay, we have a number of consent agenda items this evening, and I didn't know if there was any questions on any items. If not,
I have one,
okay, Commissioner Howerton.
0039.
And do you want to just make a comment on it, or did you want to pull it?
I'd like more of an explanation on it. I guess we-
Okay, well, we've got Marcia and Linda here, so if you don't mind just quickly coming up to the podium, and we could probably answer that question quickly. Thank you so much for being here. Okay. Good.
I didn't remember us going over, it wasn't something that was in our package for the work session, so it's on the,
It was not in your package.
right,
Found out
so,
about it after that point.
okay.
And so that is why we're bringing it this evening. The deadline is the 29th for us to get in the process. And so I was hoping with your approval, we will move forth and I'll
Well,
work.
that's,
with the next-
that's fine. I just wanted to understand what it was because we didn't go over it.
Yes,
and
you're correct.
Landed on the agendas of, okay, let's see what this is. Okay. So is it just what's here is nothing else? There's no other information?
You want me to? Every year, NACO actually asks communities to provide information for their policy agenda, and they take it from around the country.
Yeah, I'm
Because
familiar.
we are working certainly on
Yeah.
the birth to three, and they had something in there last year that was similar to this. I talked to Deborah about asking the commissioners if we could submit something from Durham. There are other communities around the country that are doing that would focus on birth to three as well as the early childhood workforce.
So is this connected with the Pritzker grant that we're working on?
Well, it would look nice to have this approved to put into the Pritzker grant.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, I just want to connect the dots.
It supports our focus. And it
All right.
kind of tells everybody what Durham stands for. Right.
Yeah, I'm pretty connected in with NACO and those folks, and I didn't see this on the agenda, so that just wanted to understand how the connection was. So thanks.
Pritzker is actually also funding NACO for some work as well.
Thank you.
I think we
Yeah.
heard from them
Yeah.
last year at one of our workshops while we were in Washington. Yeah.
So, yeah, I just want to thank you, Marcia, for your leadership on this, and Linda, because it's really important that resolutions like this that are basically asking for more federal investments in programs that support young children as a policy is really, really important. I mean, I know I've been involved in NACO resolutions, and it really helps when you get the force of a national organization all together pushing forward and lobbying. So I appreciate you alerting us to this opportunity to take leadership on this, and it totally aligns with what we're doing. And I was also thrilled to see that NACO has all these resources now around early childhood. That is fantastic.
And I'd like
So,
to add that we'll be
yeah.
working with Rachel Merker. This is her area. She's one of the staff members that represents legislation in the education area. And so she will be the one that I will be communicating with.
And Deborah, we appreciate that you will be representing us at the NACO conference
Yes.
and carrying the water for all of us.
I'll do my best.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. So we will look at approving 20-0019 through 20-00, oh, I'm sorry, 20-0039.
Move approval, and I would just like to say, when the resolution that we were just discussing is written, I'd love to get a copy of it and read it. I'm sure it'll have some good language in it we can use probably going forward.
Second.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Carter, seconded by Commissioner Reckow. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And the consent agenda is unanimously approved. We have a Unified Development Ordinance text amendment on outdoor lighting, TC 1900002.
Good evening, Chair Jacobs and members of the commission. Pat Young with the Planning Department. I'm going to turn it over to Carl Kolosna, who's a senior planner with our team. Since you haven't seen Carl before, I just wanted to spend a moment. Carl's been with us for almost 3 years and spent the first couple years working in our Development Services Center, working directly with residents and property owners, homeowners, helping them with their navigate the development process, which is an incredible experience. For the promotion, he recently received a senior planner in our policy and urban design group. So Carl's going to introduce the item and take any questions, and I'll be here to assist if that's needed.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to state for the record that all planning department hearing items have been advertised and noticed in accordance with state and local law, and affidavits of all notices are on file in the planning department. So let's, I'm just making sure that clicker. Okay, great, thank you. So text amendment TC 19-00002 is a privately initiated request to amend the Unified Development Ordinance, paragraph 7.4.2b.2, outdoor lighting applicability. So under the current ordinance, outdoor lighting that is used exclusively for recreational activities is at least 100 feet from residential uses and is not illuminated during late hours, is exempt from the lighting standards set in place by section 7.4. This amendment, were it approved, would allow lighting that operates during those late hours to maintain its exemption from the standards of 7.4, provided that a minor special use permit is issued. Per the proposed text amendments, the review criteria for the minor special use permit relate to lighting, which includes glare, traffic, safety, economic effect, and compatibility with adjacent property. So those would have to be adequately addressed in the minor special use permit hearing. In addition to the minor special use permit hearing, lighting that is illuminated during late hours would still have to be an exclusively recreational use and would have to be at least 100 feet from residential uses to maintain its exemption from the section 7.4. Finally, with the approval of a minor special use permit, the expansion on the allowable hours of illumination would be capped at 5 a.m. for Friday and Saturday and 3 a.m. for Sunday through Thursday. And this expansion of hours of illumination would only be available for development on parcels in the industrial, industrial light, and industrial park zoning districts. So I know we're a little bit in the weeds of the ordinance here, so I wanted to do a very brief overview of what the 7.4 currently does, and then just briefly talk about what these changes would be through the PowerPoint here. I think I hit the button and it takes a second for it to, oh, there we go, okay. So, and I apologize, this is a little bit small. So the current regulations for outdoor lighting, those are in section 7.4. This is an example of some of those regulations. So this is a table, and the columns there are what are called a unit of light measurement called a foot candle. And it essentially is a way to measure how much light is being emitted from a source. So per these regulations, we have both minimum and maximum allowances for essentially how bright a light can be on certain portions of the development. And those, you can think of it kind of in both ways, that one, we don't want light that is too bright, but also for safety reasons, we don't want a dearth of lighting. So we have minimum standards as well as maximums. In the next section...
I just have one question.
Yeah, sure.
Is that the same for any type of light? I mean, so with LED lights and... I mean, is it the quality of light or whatever, is it the same?
Yeah, I'm not a photometric expert, but I believe the, basically what they say, called the temperature or the color of the light may be different between an LED or a more traditional conventional light, but this is essentially a measurement of the amount of energy coming out of that system and how much light is coming out of it, so I do believe it is standardized even across new lighting sources. So in the, let's see. So the next section that we have here, it'll come up in just a second. So this table here is for points on the site, what the light is or is not. This next section here briefly goes through at the edge of the property line, which in many cases is what people are most concerned about. There are standards for what the amount of foot candles that can be emanated from the property line there, and then there are some regulations regarding full cutoff lighting, which is where you have a shield on top of it that doesn't allow light up through the top. We have some regulations about if they're located at grade, what the height of those lighting fixtures can be.
So if we go back to that last slide, the maximum illumination at the edge of the property line adjacent to residential zoning district shall be 0.5 foot candles. Can you give us some example of what a 0.5 foot candles might be in intensity?
Well, yeah, Pat.
So good evening, Pat Young again. 0.5 is one of the lowest readings that a photometer, which is how you read light measurements, can measure. So it would be if you were walking on a clear moonlit night, where it was maybe like a quarter moon or a half moon, it would be about that level of lighting. This room is approximately 40 to 50 foot candles right now.
I think that, to me, when you sent this out earlier in the day, this was very important, because what then these folks putting up lighting, if they are adjacent to residential, of course, we're saying they can't be the lights can't be any closer than 100 feet. But in addition, there is this standard that if they put up the light at the property line, so it's not at the building, which would be, further into the property, at the property line, it can only be 0.5. I just think that's an important safeguard here for the residents. Okay.
I guess my question, though, when you say 0.5 foot candles, where are you measuring that light? Is it literally on the ground, or is it in the air? I mean, I'm only saying this because I've actually had a personal having a personal experience with light pollution, and unfortunately, it's in a location there where they don't have very good ordinances, and so I'm realizing how important it is to have really clear ordinances to protect people.
Sure, Chair Jacobs. Pat Young again. That's a very good question. It's done at breast height, which is about 4 or 5 feet at the property line. Now, we have had issues in other cases where, because of changes in grade, it meets that standard at the property line at breast height, but because of where the pole is located, it can be in somebody's second 4-bedroom window, for example.
Yeah.
So we try to review that now at the site plan stage to see if they're changing the grade, that there's not that impact. And we've worked with applicants to put on shields or other directional baffles or controls. But the measurement that we require at the time of certificate of occupancy is that breast height at the property line.
Yeah, see, I'm a little bit concerned just about whether even with that, you could still have a situation where the light is coming in somebody's home. And I think that's the big issue is about interfering with people's ability to sleep, right? I mean, that's what comes down to it, is what we have to be worried about. And especially with LED lights, because there's documentation that they can impact people's sleep cycles, and I don't understand the science behind it, but.
So the proposal before you tonight, the applicant proposed that the allowance that's being asked for be granted administratively, so that they would just submit a site plan, we would review it and approve it. Staff felt, because of exactly the kind of concerns that you just raised, Chair Jacob, that there could be some very site-specific issues about where the lights are mounted on a pole relative to people's sleeping areas, for example, that we required the minor special use permit. The minor special use permit is going to really get into the details of site-specific assessment of where the light, what kind of fixtures it is, the wattage, the directionality, and it can be done assessed from adjacent properties at any point on an adjacent property. So that we feel as staff that use permit process allows the Board of Adjustment, who hears that permit, to assess that on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. So the last section here are a few regulations about non-directional lighting, glare, ensuring that the light isn't oriented to create excessive illumination that would cause concerns, and a few regulations on nonconformities. So what we're really talking about here in this section is the applicability of these lighting standards. So currently, under our existing ordinance, this is a screenshot of, it says lighting used exclusively for recreational activities, concert plays, and other events that are open to the public, provided that light fixtures are located at least 100 feet from residential uses, and that the event meets other applicable zoning requirements. Those are exempt from the lighting standards that we have currently. And under that sort of applicability exemption clause, we have regulations saying that such lighting shall not be illuminated between the hours of midnight and 8 a.m., between 1 a.m. and 8 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays, except in a few of our downtown zoning districts. So for the proposed text that we have here today, so there's a couple of pieces here. The first is we've struck basically that section talking about the hours of operations, because within that there's already an exemption for, or a special regulation for the downtown zoning districts. And then this proposal is essentially to add another exemption or sort of a specific requirement on that applicability. So for readability, we recommended breaking them up into 3 discrete parts. The first one just says that there are, just as it is right now, there are no limitations on those time limits for the lighting in our downtown districts. In all other districts, besides the I, IL, and IP zoning district, the regulations are as they were before. And then number C here is really the crux of what we're talking about, which is that in the I, IL, and IP districts, we have a small extension on the hours of illumination with the issuance of a minor special use permit. And for that minor special use permit, it's a quasi-judicial hearing where evidence has to be presented by experts. And the criteria for it, per this the proposed text, include lighting, with a review factor saying that location of exterior lighting with reference to glare, traffic safety, economic effect, and compatibility with other property in the area, that would have to be shown to be in conformance, basically, at the minor special use permit hearing. And in addition to that, we have an effect on nearby property, which is effects on the proposed use on nearby property, including but not limited to the effects of noise, odor, lighting, and traffic. So essentially, what we have is a request for a small increase in the hours of illumination, and in kind, we have a requirement to go through a minor special use permit where, in an evidentiary-based manner, on a case-by-case basis, the applicant would have to show how the proposed development was meeting these review criteria.
I have a question on that point. So the last, in C, it has time frames that it could get extended until. In one of the planning commissioner's comments, there seemed to be the statement that it was unlawful, this proposed amendment, because the extension was unlimited and there weren't boundaries. But there are boundaries. Were these added after the planning commission made their vote?
Yes, that's correct. And there's another point on that is we've checked with our city attorney who did not see it the same way, that first ordinance, even if it was unlimited to their eyes, was still lawful under our regulation. For that reasons and others, to narrow the scope, the proposed impact of this text amendment, we added in that addition to put a cap on what those hours of expansion would be.
Okay.
And additionally, this one has the version that went before the Planning Commission didn't have the limitations on specific zoning districts. It was in all zoning districts.
Right.
So that was another result of that this is a...
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that, because that was going to be my follow-up question, was that this one specifies I, IL, and IP. And so that, could you just highlight what are the changes? Because, all of us read the Planning Commission comments in detail, which were really excellent. Can you highlight to us what have been the changes from the input of the planning commissioners?
Yes, so the changes as a result of the Planning Commissioner's comments and other comments were those 2 items, where everything else was the same, except we've specified what the hours of illumination extension would be, whereas it was unlimited before, and required it just for these 3 zoning districts, whereas it applied to all zoning districts on the old version. But besides that, everything is the same between the version that was seen for Planning Commission and the version we have.
That was my question, Madam Chair, was to point out the changes that has been made since the Planning Commission made their comments, because we were reading those and sounded like some changes needed to be made, but you've already made those.
I guess the other major issue that several of the commissioners raised that perhaps we could get on the floor for, to get response about, is the issue that this seems to be inappropriate to be amending the ordinance at the request of one business property owner, that. During my time on the board, I can remember a number of instances where that has happened. And actually, we just recently at Joint City County Planning entertained a proposal coming forward from an applicant who I think is sponsoring it as it relates to changes in what's allowed, regulations as it relates to housing in order to help promote affordable housing. So, I mean, there's a variety of reasons individuals bring forward changes. Over the years that has occurred. I was curious, was there anything in particular that came up during this hearing, Patrick, that led to that being such a focus of attention by the Planning Commission?
So I'll let Carl speak to the Planning Commission. I watched it at home, but I wasn't present. I will say this, when we receive these privately petitioned text amendments, which we do usually a couple times a year, we carefully review them to make sure that they're, in our judgment, meet the public interest. And if they don't, we recommend changes that we think will make it do so, or we would oppose it when it comes to you all. In this case, we, as I mentioned earlier, suggested and the applicant agreed to add the use permit requirement, which really does impose a very high level of accountability and site-specific evaluation onto the review. So I just wanted to kind of, and then with the Planning Commissioner's comments that you alluded to, I think it was even further improved by specifying those limited districts and the specific hours. In terms of how the Planning Commission, I may let Carl speak to what concerns led to those comments. Commissioner Miller was one.
Yeah, my understanding is one of the points of concern was that this is it's a privately initiated text amendment, but there is a development that is in mind and under review currently in the planning department that is coming from the same applicants as this text amendment and will directly benefit from that. So I think there was concern on the commissioner's part that notification around this rule change, well, there was notification per state and local regulations, and we've also put it on the electronic notification system, but that those who are immediately adjacent to the site were not specifically notified about this text amendment being changed. In response to that, staff feels that the notification requirements around the minor special use permit are site-specific and will require all property owners within 600 feet of the project boundaries to be notified, and signs will be put up on the site. So I can see the concerns, but that's staff's response.
Okay. And why aren't adjacent property owners notified with a text amendment that could directly impact them?
Sure. So text amendments apply countywide.
Oh, because it's countywide. Okay.
There's over 110,000
I see.
parcels, so any direct
Okay.
mailing would be.
Okay. I think the other point that was raised by planning commissioners was why do a text amendment that is countywide versus a variance? And were there any other ways to address this need to be site-specific rather than affecting the entire county?
Sure, so that's a good question. The variance, finding for a variance requires that there be hardship, and there really wasn't a hardship in this case. This is essentially what amounts to a policy change to allow, with the site-specific evaluation at the use permit process, a slight increase in the hours of operation to accommodate the recreational use. So this could apply to other uses in the future, certainly. I would predict that it will, as these types of entertainment centers become more frequent and start to try to operate 16, 18 hours. So there really wasn't a ready tool to do it on a site-specific basis. Really, only the variance is available, and it didn't seem to meet that hardship criteria.
Commissioner Carter.
So if we approve this, we need to also, have pass that statement saying it's consistent with the comprehensive plan and is in the public interest. I'm really having trouble figuring out how this is in the public interest. I don't know that it's harming the public necessarily. Seems like we have, safeguards built in, but I don't know how this is in the public interest.
Certainly. So I believe Mayor Schul spoke to this a little bit. So we pretty consistently have developers who come into Durham who want to develop, whether it's houses or commercial development, and that development first contributes to the general fund through property taxes, and it also creates amenities that are, accessible to members of the public who are interested in doing that. And then, additionally, we feel that that's a contribution to the public. The concern potentially is that there would be a detrimental impact to the public as a result of this development, and staff feels that the minor special use permit, through the requirement of evidence being presented in a hearing where there are specific requirements ensuring that the lighting is not detrimental to adjacent property owners, puts assurances and protections in place that properly balance out the benefits that may see.
A good answer. And I guess that's assuming that if this change is not granted, then this business would choose not to locate here.
So in this instance, the city, and we probably should have mentioned this at the outset, the city's already acted on this, and the specific applicant's business is going to be located in the city limits. Okay. So it wouldn't have any direct bearing. But in general, that is a possibility when these types of petitioned changes come. And again, I hope we have your confidence that we're carefully looking at these to make sure we're protecting the public interest. We really do believe that the limitations on the standard and the use permit process does that in this case.
Okay. And one of the other commissioners, had a statement about this business not paying living wages. Do we have any reason to believe that they're not paying living wages?
I would defer that question to the applicants.
Oh, they're here.
When we open the public hearing, we'll
Okay.
have that. You'll be able to ask that of the applicant. All right. So, Carl, we'll let you continue.
I think I'm close to done, actually.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Okay, you're done with your presentation because we kind of got our questions in. Commissioner Howerton?
I have one other question regarding something that Pat said earlier about once this is, if this is approved tonight, could you restate what you said there?
In terms of the impact on the applicant's proposed utilization of these provisions?
You mentioned if it's approved tonight, the next step. And
So yeah, well, the next step, anytime a property owner would like to use these provisions, a minor special use permit process is required. So that means a separate application to the planning department, notice to all owners within 600 feet, and posting of signs. And then a hearing by the Board of Adjustment that does a site-specific evaluation about whether or not this lighting would have negative impacts on adjacent properties. So that's the next step.
I think that was the piece that I particularly wanted the public to hear, that there is another stage to this once this is approved, if this is approved tonight.
Yes, exactly. And that was part of the reason on the question of notification, that this is the first, will be a more site-specific process.
Thank you.
Okay, I will now open the public hearing, and we have one applicant to speak, Keith Burns. And if you don't mind coming and stating your name and address.
Madam Chair, Keith Burns, Acorn Ridge Court, Durham, North Carolina, here on behalf of the applicant. Good to be with you all this evening. You've done such a great job asking questions. You really have stolen my thunder, so I'll be as brief as I can. I say that not to complain, but by way of compliment. To reiterate a couple of things, as Mr. Young said, we started out with staff with a proposal to staff. Staff made a couple of suggestions. We tweaked the proposal. We then went to Joint City-County Planning, didn't hear any comments there, moved forward to Planning Commission, received some comments there, and agreed to tweaks of the language again, all in an effort to come to some agreement with staff and with the board there that was making this recommendation to you all. We think we've come to a really good place with this. The other thing that I would underscore, Commissioner Jacobs, you very rightly recognize that this has the potential to be injurious to neighbors, and that's not at all our intent. And as Mr. Young said several times, this special use permit application process is designed to prevent that. It provides notice to the neighbors around and then puts the burden of proof on us to establish that it's not going to have any sort of negative impact on any of the surrounding property owners. I think the elephant in the room is who this is and what we're doing, and I'm happy to address that elephant if that makes anybody more comfortable about this. And I'm also happy to talk about the site and the distances between that site and the adjoining property owner. And I will do that, though, but I want to be very clear, that's not the matter before the board, and I don't want to confuse you and leave you thinking that I'm asking for more than I am. All I'm asking for tonight is the ability to come back later at a quasi-judicial hearing and really get into the details. So with that caveat, the site that we're talking about is at the intersection of Page Road and I-40. The entire southern boundary of that site is I-40 and then the office park that is IQVIA further south. The site's going to have a mandatory 100-foot buffer along I-40 and then with the right-of-way and then IQVIA. Parking lot at IQVIA is routinely lit. There are, at the intersection of Page Road and I-40, about 6 75-foot tall lights that are installed by DOT. There are another group of those lights just down the road at the intersection of 540. To the north, the entire northern boundary of the site is owned by Wake County. It's a part of its Crabtree Creek watershed protection area. There's also not wetlands, but flood zone on the site that's going to create buffer. So there's a substantial amount of buffer on the northern side of the site. If you move almost 800 feet across that retaining pond that you all can see from 540 and 40, you do get to an apartment complex that, again, is about 800 feet, but there are two really substantial strips of wooded buffer between there. And then there's another apartment complex that's a little over 2,000 feet further to the west. So this is an isolated site and a place that we don't think is going to have any problem at all establishing the review factors that are called for in the special use permit. The reason that the additional hours of lighting are important to us is Topgolf is considering relocating to this site or locating on this site. There are a couple of things to know about that. Topgolf will bring with it jobs, and Commissioner Carter, I regret that I don't have the full data on that, and I am sure that the ultimate answer to your question is that there's going to be a range of compensation in those jobs, from folks that are lower paid service jobs to folks that are more highly compensated because of the roles that they play, as you would expect with most any sort of service industry. But there will be jobs there, there'll be an increase in tax base, and there will be certainly an amenity that will be a substantial draw for not only Durham but surrounding areas, which creates, again, tax base and sales tax revenue. The operational model for Topgolf is that they are in operation, give or take, 8 a.m. to midnight, 1 a.m. during the week, and then that doesn't leave a whole lot of time for maintenance in the outfield, and that maintenance in the outfield is effectively the hours of additional operation that we've requested. And then likewise, those hours shift to be a little bit later on Friday night and Saturday night. So that's that's the reason that we're here. But again, the request that we have tonight is merely that we be allowed to come back at a quasi-judicial hearing after notice to the neighbors to prove that it will not have a deleterious impact on the surrounding properties.
Okay, Mr. Howerton, then Commissioner Carter.
Two questions. Can you tell me which side of 40 are we looking at?
The north side of 40, so if you were standing at IQVIA and looking north, looking across 40, it's that parcel there.
Opposite the park.
It's opposite of the Sheridan?
Yeah, on the other side of 40.
It's on the other side of 40, okay. So, and the other question is related to what Heidi just mentioned. You don't know if the wages will be, you know, where I'm going with that.
I don't know
$dollars an hour or less.
I don't know
The lowest paid people, you don't know.
I don't know what the wages will be there.
Would be good to know that. Be good for the folks. And I hear you say you don't have that information.
Mr. Howard, I would tell you if I knew about it.
I know, my attorney's saying, okay, you're getting into an area I'm not supposed to go into, but I just.
Thank you for reading my mind.
Commissioner Carter.
Well, I mean, I would just say, you know, it's one of our high values that businesses in this community do remunerate their employees at least at the living wage level. Durham County pays $15 an hour, and I just would be really disappointed if this business didn't do that. Sorry, you can't tell us that you will be paying a living wage, but just it would be disappointing.
I hear you.
Any other questions related to, for Mr. Burns? Okay, I will now, I guess I will close the public hearing and bring it back. I have a question for Carl, one more question. Could you kind of walk us through the special use permit process? Because that will not come to our board, that will come to the Board of Adjustment.
That's correct. So
And can you
the Board of Adjustment is the governing body for it. There is a pre-submittal application that the applicant does with one of our staff liaisons in the planning department, who's the liaison to the Board of Adjustment. And then very similar to a council meeting or a commissioners meeting, there is a public notification process that begins where the property is identified, mailers are sent out, our zoning enforcement team goes out and physically puts a sign on the property saying that there's going to be a public hearing on the minor special use permit. And then during the hearing itself, I have to admit I'm not quite as familiar with it, but it's a quasi-judicial hearing, so everything that is presented at it has to be presented in an evidentiary-based manner. So, for example, any discussion around the lighting would have to be verified by an engineer, would have to bring a schematic and on, you know, basically in accordance with their seal, with their certification. They're putting their expertise on the line, saying, I'm an expert of this information, and I verify that this information is correct. So I imagine at the hearing there would be detailed discussion about any adjacent uses, any adjacent residential uses, and schematics and diagrams and such that would show what the potential impacts from lighting would be to be able to make that determination. The board also, as a quasi-judicial board, has discretion to put requirements or stipulations on the use permit that I believe can be pretty broad. So, for example, they could ask for the location of lighting to be changed. They could have cutoffs put on it. Obviously, through this, they're allowed to set the hours of illumination, but there's a wide range of things, as it's a quasi-judicial hearing, that they can impose on the applicant as a condition of approval of the permit.
And will the planning department make any recommendations if they feel necessary to?
So after all the testimony is provided at the hearing, the planning department would make a recommendation. We won't do so until all the evidence is presented. And as the attorney for the applicant correctly stated, and I think it's a very important point, the burden of proof is on the applicant to show that they're meeting all these factors. And they've got to prove that to the board's satisfaction. If they don't, the permit has to be denied. If they do meet all those criteria, the permit would have to be approved. Staff will assess the evidence that's presented and make a recommendation to the board.
And then after, for instance, the facility is built, is there a process where there is an inspection to make sure that that criteria is being met?
There's at the time certificate of occupancy, meaning prior to them being able to legally occupy or use the property, there would be an inspection for all those, any conditions. Carl gave several examples that could be on that use permit, or it's called an order that's issued, similar to a court. And then, of course, there's if there's any noncompliance, our enforcement folks go out and cite them and require that there be $500 a day civil citations or cease and desist the activity, usually immediately, but it can be within up to 14 days, depending on what the activity.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Carter.
So, Pat and Carl, is our vote really only going to have any effect on the unincorporated areas? I mean, the city's already voted to approve this, and so this particular site and business has already been given the approval by the city, so it's going to move forward either way.
That's correct. We make every effort to keep the Unified Development Ordinance unified.
Right.
It'd be city and county. And as I alluded to earlier, and I want to emphasize that I'm purely speculating here, I do think these types of entertainment venues are an emerging sector across the country, and there's a more than modest chance that you'll see one of these for real in the future. But there's not one currently proposed or active now.
Gotcha. Just want to be sure I was understanding. It's like the EHC, in a way.
Yes.
Trying to be unified.
Yes.
Right. Okay, any other comments? Commissioner Recco?
Well, I think that the planning director's right. We're seeing more and more this focus on a whole variety of entertainment options. You can go downtown and get a beer and throw axes, so there's all kinds of things that people are doing in their spare time to have fun, and this will be another one of those things. So, Madam Chair, I'd like to put forward a motion, if it's appropriate, if there aren't any other questions. I would like to move to adopt the appropriate statement of consistency pursuant to NCGS 153A-341.
Moved by Commissioner Recco, seconded by Commissioner Howerton. Is that correct? Yeah. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And the consistency statement is approved.
Anyone else want to do the second motion?
Pull it back.
I'll make it. To adopt an ordinance amending the Unified Development Ordinance incorporating revisions to amend Article 7 design standards.
Moved by Commissioner Recco, seconded by Commissioner Hill. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And the ordinance amendment is approved. So thank you, everyone. And I would just say that I think this is also a good example of how important our members of our Planning Commission are, and the input, and that I think we've ended up with something that is better than what started out with. And so appreciate that as well. Thank you all.
I just want to second that. I always look at their comments, and I appreciate the time that they're taking to write those comments after the meeting. And they really dig in, ask good questions, and I think we're very lucky. If you would convey our thanks to the Planning Commission for doing due diligence and continue at a high standard, high level.
I certainly will, Commissioner Recco, and thank you for those comments. We certainly agree with you, and as evidenced in this case, we take their feedback and comments very seriously and make changes where we think it's appropriate. Thank you.
Right. And Commissioner Carter?
One more technical question. I'm sorry, I should have asked it before. I never could figure out how this was a 9-4 vote. Were 5 people absent, and so their votes went in the affirmative?
So there's 14 members, so there's 1 absent member.
Well, the comments we had were 4. It was like a tie.
Yes, there was one Commissioner Baker on the Planning Commission at the hearing voted in favor of it, but then after the vote decided that he wasn't in favor of it. So his comments are in opposition to it, but his vote at the hearing was in favor of it.
Right, but when I went through the comments and counted up the numbers for and the numbers against, there was 4 for and 4 against, or maybe it was 5 against.
I don't think everyone writes
Some commissioners don't
comments.
make written.
Yeah, they don't all write comments.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes, yes,
It would be good at least if they put 4, you know?
yes,
Okay.
They usually do. We haven't required that.
right, right.
That confused me. Got it.
Thank you. Okay, we have, next we have board and commission appointments.
Talmadge has probably been on this farmland board for 25
Madam Chair, I have the results of your voting. For the Alliance Board of Directors, you could select one person. You selected Jennifer Anderson. For the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee, you could select one person. You selected Joy Nolan. For the Board of Health, you could select one person. You selected Eric Ireland. For the Boxing and Wrestling Commission, you could select one person. You selected Jonathan Leach. For the City County Appearance Commission, you could select one person. You selected Katina Rogers. For the Durham Open Space and Trails Commission, you could select two. You've selected William Aiken and Reynolds Smith. For the Farmland Protection Advisory Board, you can select one person. You've selected Talmadge Layton. And for the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council, you could select one person, and you've selected DeWarren Langley. That concludes your voting, the results of your voting.
Okay, thank you. And I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
A quick question before we adjourn. We have not received anything on a 10-year plan for facility for the schools yet, have we? Manager?
The schools, if you recall, when we had our joint meeting, had completed the long-term facility master planning process. And subsequently, we had a chance to see that. And if you recall, during our last set of discussions, we basically had asked them to go back and to take that facility master plan and turn it into a workable solution that would address cash flow requirements. And so just before the holiday, if you recall, I copied you on a letter submitting that request to the schools. So that's where we are at this point, trying to get some information back from them so that we can move forward and have some subsequent discussions on our capital planning process.
Thank you.
Okay, so I entertained a motion to adjourn.
Moved. Second.
Moved by Commissioner Carter, seconded by Commissioner Howerton. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We're unanimously adjourned.